Welcome back, everyone, to this Week 13 edition of Bruce Monnin's Computer Points podcast. I, of course, am Bruce Monnin, your host, recording from our studio in Minster, Ohio, checking in from the greater Cincinnati area, home of the 5-5 Cincinnati Bearcats, who, by the way, my wife said played one of the most boring games she's ever seen in her life last weekend.
Oh, no.
We have our co-host, executive producer, and chief researcher, Rebekah Monnin.
Always a pleasure to be here.
By the way, on the up note for us Cincinnati fans, as soon as we finish recording this podcast, we can see if our basketball team can travel to Northern Kentucky and go 4-0 on the season.
I would sure hope so.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Kentucky's, they're not having an impressive year. I'll say that.
No, they're not. No, they are not.
Although we might be trapped in the city by the fact that we keep losing bridges.
Oh, which bridge is causing trouble now?
Oh, still just 471. Turns out when you light a big old plastic playground underneath it on fire, it causes a little bit of structural damage. Pro tip.
Isn't that
Don't
the
burn
bridge
fires under your bridges.
Isn't that the bridge people have to take to get to Northern Kentucky University, by the way?
Yeah, but you could also take the 75, 71, the Brent Spence.
Yeah, all we need is more traffic on those bridges, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, also joining us this week, instead of just Rebekah, although we love it when it's just Rebekah,
Thanks.
we have Don Kemper, the former commissioner of the Midwest Athletic Conference. Welcome, Don.
Hey, Bruce. Thank you. It's a pleasure to join you guys. Watched the podcast a couple of times and always enjoyed it.
It's our pleasure to have you, Don. Now, we'll get right to business here. I imagine our listeners have no idea what a high school conference commissioner does, because I have no idea what a high school conference commissioner does. I've watched a few little football through the years. You know, in the NFL, they have a commissioner. He gets paid like a couple of $100 million a year. And I think all he does, he shows up the first day of the NFL draft, gets booed a lot, and then he goes away. It's a good gig if you can get it. College commissioners, all I see them do is try to steal teams from other college commissioners to add to their conference. Seems like a little more work, but still, you know, that's all we see that the commissioners do. Can you fill us in on what the commissioner of a high school conference does?
Yeah, I'll be glad to give some insight into that. You know, one thing I can guarantee, it's the pay is much less than the NFL commissioner, and by the way, much less than the college commissioners. Not tasked with drafts or stealing teams from other conferences, so that makes it fun. Yeah, so as a commissioner of a conference, it's kind of interesting that actually when I took the job back in 2013. It was, you know, they gave me a list of responsibilities, and I had no idea what a conference commissioner did. Then they said the job is yours. So now I have too much of an idea of what a conference commissioner does. But, you know, there are a lot of things from a financial standpoint. You know, high school conference, number one, I'll lead in by saying I don't believe from a tax standpoint I ever made money as commissioner of the Midwest Athletic Conference. The pay they gave me and the miles I traveled, the time it took, I probably was well under minimum wage and probably at some years lost money. So my wife didn't think I was very intelligent when I took this gig. But, you know, from a responsibility standpoint, there's, you know, all the financial responsibilities. So there's obviously a group of schools, 10 schools, 11 schools if you count Anna in football, that come together to make up that conference. And there's really, it's really, there's no one who takes care of the finances. As a conference commissioner, you're basically a treasurer. And then as a commissioner, you're also responsible for 4 meetings a year for our conference. One in August. It was always the first Wednesday in August, the first Wednesday in October, the last Wednesday in January. And for whatever reason, somewhere in the middle of the month of April on a Wednesday. But I was responsible for putting together the agenda. So I was also a recorder, so I had to record the minutes for the meeting. That meeting would usually last, it would start at noon with lunch. Hopefully there's some school administrators that are listening, but it would start at lunch because we all know that school administrators can't do anything without eating. So you have to have some meal to get them to show up. So we would have lunch from usually 12 to 12:30, and then I would have to pay for that out of the conference funds. And then the meeting would start at 12:30 and usually last between 2:30 to 3 o'clock. It would be over, depending on what was on the agenda and the conversations. And a lot of times it was trying to keep people on task and on target. The conversations would sometimes drift, and we'd have to refocus and get people talking about what we came to talk about. So there was a lot of activity around those meetings. Most of the meetings were held at Coldwater High School because it's more of a central location for all the schools. When you think about Delphos St. John's and Versailles, being the furthest north and the furthest south, and then east to west, you have New Knoxville is the furthest east, and Fort Recovery Parkway are the furthest west. So, pretty good geographical area. And if you look at that, Coldwater is kind of in the center of it. And they had a really nice meeting room. So we would do those meetings at Coldwater High School in the CAV room. I would take care of doing all the all-conference stuff, which takes up a lot of time. So querying coaches on their selections for their all-conference awards. And there was really not a whole lot of structure around it. It was a pretty general statement that said you could basically nominate anyone for all conference and in any sport, but they needed to have a minimum requirement of, it said something about their athletic ability, right? So it was pretty general statement, and it ranged from people that were strategic with it. Because some coaches are very strategic. They would say, hey, you know what? For example, one center from each team. Well, it was easy. Very few teams would nominate more than one center. If it was receiver, there were a total of 4 receivers on the team. One team might nominate 3 receivers. Some of the more strategic coaches understood that they may just split the vote, so they would nominate 1 receiver, understanding that there was a higher likelihood that they would make first team if they didn't split that vote among other receivers on their team. So it was interesting to see that side of things. And so for all sports, we would do all conference teams. And in some of them, it was easy. Cross country, for example, it was pretty straightforward. The top finishers in the conference meet, 1 through 12, all conference. Made my job pretty easy in cross country. We did have, being from Minster, I think this is probably something that you guys should be aware of. They had what we called a Minster rule for boys and girls cross country. So there were limits on how many first team honorees could be from one school. As you can imagine, the reason they called it the Minster rule is because it was usually Minster. In fact, I don't know that it was ever someone other than Minster. But it's funny. Bruce, we worked together at Minster Machine for several years, and I would come into work on Saturday quite a bit when my kids were younger, especially in the summertime. I'd say, hey, I'll buy you an ice cream cone if we don't see somebody running when we get into Minster. And my kids were all excited. They thought they were going to get an ice cream cone. And like every time somebody was running. So it's kind of a funny aside. That's the kind of thing that, Minster's known for, and among other things, obviously, the most state championships in the MAC, but just kind of some interesting aspects of what goes on in the conference. And then along with the all conference stuff, I had to organize the sports banquets, purchase awards, and do all MAC academic certificates to hand out. So, I would get those printed, sign them, and distribute them to the schools. You think that that's all conference, all academic. You think that that's not a big deal. There are a lot of smart people in the MAC, is what I found out. So that would sometimes give you writer's cramp, getting those documents ready. So, but there weren't a lot of communications that came from the conference, but I was responsible for any communications that might come or might need to be made from the conference. For example, when we added bowling, I'm sending out a press release for that, a press release for the all conference teams to notify media of who made the all conference teams and things like that. So, and then something you're very familiar with, Bruce, and maybe you can talk a little bit about it, is the football scheduling. So we had literally 2 different schedules. There was a master schedule, we called it, and the master schedule was pretty easy to do because it was a schedule that just rotated from top to bottom and it never changed. So somebody could look at that master schedule and see in 2038 who they're going to play week one, right? It was pretty easy to follow. As you're aware, there was a change to the football scheduling, and you were very involved in that. In fact, I believe I wasn't involved in the MAC at the time, but I believe you came up with a system that they use to this day to figure out who's playing who and who's not, because they went to a 9-game schedule, or excuse me, an 8-game schedule in the conference instead of 9. I know you did a lot of work around that, and I know I interacted with you several times after I took the job as far as you modeling what would have happened if we would have played the full schedule and getting like feedback from you as far as how that would have worked out. So there's a lot of strategy involved, and I'll let you talk about the football schedule for a little bit.
Yeah, one year I was at a game at Fort Recovery and I opened my mouth a little too much. The principal at Fort Recovery at the time was doing stats for their football team. So we were sitting together at the game. And actually, when he first came, he taught at Minster. And his first year he came, I was a junior, I believe. And I was on the golf team, and he had to be golf coach because they would only give him the job if he would become the golf coach. So I was like, there was a couple of us that were the first people we met. So I'd known him for years, and it was Ed Schneider at Fort Recovery. And Fort Recovery had just started playing MAC football, and they were having a lot of trouble. And we were up in the booth, and I said, well, if you watch like the Big Ten, they don't play everybody. They all make sure they skip a couple of games so they can place, Northern Illinois or whoever, get their wins, get up to bowl eligibility, get more bowl teams, get more, that sort of thing. We're all talking about that. And like 2 days later, I get a phone call from someone at the MAC, whoever was the commissioner at the time.
Tim Busher, I believe.
Yeah, I believe it was. And he said, like, we have a meeting Wednesday. They want you to come and give this proposal. So I was actually working as a substitute teacher at the time, and I was teaching at Minster that day. And I had a period where I had like an open period and then lunch and another open period or something weird like that during the day. So I had like 2 hours of nothing to do. So I was there. There was this big, huge whiteboard in front of me. So I got out the pens and I drew up that MAC schedule on the whiteboard and then had to move it to got home, made it look pretty, put together this whole thing and gave a proposal at the MAC conference meeting on Wednesday. And I don't remember how long it took. I had to talk to a lot of people after that. So a couple of months, I think, until they approved that. That's how that went down. So yeah, I've been at a couple of those MAC meetings. Most of the time it was cheap, some kind of cheap ham sandwich or something that they fed them. But once we had a really nice like wedding chicken dinner. So that was nice.
Yeah, those were usually right before the banquets. Anytime there was a MAC meeting, at the time they were going to, I think some of the meetings were at Romer's Catering.
That's where it was at. Yep.
Yep.
That would
So
do
it was kind of funny. Anytime they had a banquet, they would have a meeting that day at noon, and then banquet was that night, and Romer's would let them use the facility and then provide food. So when I got involved, we went back to the schools and held those at the schools. So it was a little bit of change. So
that explains how I got that one good meeting out of that. Or one good meal. That was as I was working as a substitute teacher at the time, I would just actually be like one day I'd be at New Bremen school and I would talk to the New Bremen athletic director during lunch or for a while. Next day I'd be at Marion Local and I would end up sitting in a room with Tim Goodwin and the athletic director and the principal or something for a while. And I just kept going school to school and just kept talking to people. And eventually that's how that current MAC schedule came about. I actually proposed a 7-game when I put it together.
Yep.
And Fort Recovery in New Bremen said yes. And everyone else said, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah. So my last year, it's funny. My last year, several of the schools who are having trouble finding non-conference teams had come together and wanted to change it back to a 9-team schedule. They had a little trouble trying to push that agenda. There were teams that just, whether they had rivalry games or whatever, they just didn't want to go down that path again. So, and some cases it was competition, but Yeah. I mean, you did a lot of work on that scheduling, and I mean, the case could be made that you're responsible for a lot of the multi teams in the state championships because had they gone to stayed on a 9-team schedule, some of those teams may have not have made it to state. I remember when my oldest son was playing in 2006. I think it was Parkway had Jordan Thompson. He was really good. 2007, I guess it was, maybe. He was really good, and Parkway was only had, I think, one loss against Marion Local, and they didn't make the playoffs. And they were a really good team. They gave Marion that year everything they wanted. But interesting little side note there. But that's helped propel. I mean, if you look even this year, they expanded to 16 teams, and now Delphos St. John's in a regional final at a 15 seed.
Well, yes, we just may be talking about Delphos St. John's a little bit later in the pod.
There you go, a little preview. And then I'll tell you probably the biggest part of what I did for the MAC, the thing that took the most time, was assigning officials for all the games. Some cases, just conference games for some schools. In some cases, conference and non-conference games. So that took a lot of time, and you always have people last minute canceling out on games and trying to find replacements. Then along with that, that was baseball, basketball, softball, football, and volleyball. So it doesn't sound like much, but when their basketball went to 22 games, it became, believe it or not, significantly more difficult because if weather event delayed or postponed one of those games, they'd try to fit it in, and nobody was available on the date they rescheduled it, right? So it became a little bit of a mess at times. And then, I was kind of tasked with doing that at least a year in advance. I would do it 2 years in advance until my last year. And actually, I got where I work, Flex Machine Tools in Wapakoneta, I was promoted to president of the company, and I knew I wouldn't have time to do that job anyway. And the OHSA went from something that was really easy to assign officials to a product called Dragonfly. And that's when I said, not only do I think it's going to be a problem to hang on to that position, it's not going to work. It went literally, a season used to take me maybe an hour and a half, and that went to 3 hours. So it doubled the time it took to assign games, and it just became crazy from a time standpoint. And then every year at the end of the year, I would provide the schools with basically the results of all the games, conference games for that year, and who the champion was, and that kind of thing, team champion for each sport. And that always happened at the end of the year, conference standings. Rob Hemmelgarn helped me tremendously with that. Rob, for people that don't know, did a ton of work and was not compensated for it. So it's good to see him get the conference commissioner job because he's now getting paid for the stuff that he wasn't getting paid for back then. So good to see, and Rob does a great job with it. And then I took care of the website the last couple of years, and I know Rob is in the process of updating the website, so hopefully to make it a little bit easier to manage. And that was pretty much it. That's all I did. And then, by the way, I would go to every school in every sport for one home conference game to watch the officials that I assigned to that school. So that took up a lot of time, caused a lot of travel. I would go to hand out the trophies when a conference champion when somebody was playing for a conference championship. And that's something that started probably back in 2015, 16, but people loved it because it used to be handed out at the conference awards banquet, and you might have 2 people from the team that were there to accept the award. And, there are 12 guys 12 ladies that participated in that sport, that 10 of them didn't get to see the trophy until it went in the trophy case. So when we started giving it away the day of the game, it became much nicer. People enjoyed that, I think, and it added a little bit of, I can recall some times where one in particular, I ran up to Delphos St. John's because St. Henry was going to win the volleyball, the conference championship in volleyball. They were playing at St. John's, and then I had to get back to Coldwater because they were also going to share it. So, doing stuff like that and driving probably faster than I should have to get back to make that trophy presentation. But I did that for 11 years, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was something that if you don't like sports, or if you're not you have to more than like sports to do it. You have to be stupid and like sports, I think, is the way it works. And I'm both. So, but yeah, I enjoyed every minute of it. And like I said, until I got too busy at work, if I still had time, I would have kept doing it. But I always kind of looked at it as an opportunity to do something after I retired. Got out of it before that happened, but all good.
All good.
Right. Well, before we move on, do you have any questions, Rebekah?
No, I don't think so. Although I want to admit to an embarrassing note that I forgot for a second there that the conference does more than football. So you started talking about bowling and track. I was like, oh yeah, we have more sports that you would have to manage.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the interesting thing, especially being from Minster, I don't even know where Minster is right now. I think when I left, they were at 35 state championships, something like that.
It's up there.
A bunch of cross country and track.
Mm-hmm. Couple
basketball, or a couple footballs. Yeah. So
yeah.
golf, I think,
Yep.
and boys golf, and it's fun, and that's what made it fun. And it's funny you bring that up because I told people for a long time that I couldn't imagine being commissioner for a conference that was less competitive because it wouldn't have been as much fun. Like there's nothing like going to a game. I joked with Sonny Folks, who does Press Pros Magazine. He would call me up before the first game of football, and he'd say, hey, where are you going tonight? First conference game. And I'd say, that's the beauty of what I do. Like I could go to 3 games and they'd all be great games and they'd all be well attended. And it was like that every sport, competitiveness, every sport season. Again, if I always said if I was commissioner of a less competitive conference, I probably wouldn't have done it for 11 years.
I think that's enough MAC specific stuff, as I'm sure we're going to get to plenty of that later on here in the podcast. It's time to hit the rest of the teams we cover here in West Central Ohio, don't you think, Rebekah?
Oh, I think so. We're not exactly doing a good job at equal coverage time. I think our fans know that.
As usual, we will look at the regional final playoff matchups. We'll give a brief overview of what Drew Pasteur's Fantastic 50 computer says the outcome may be. And we might even throw in our own opinions a little bit here, Rebekah.
I think it'd be hard to get us to stop.
So, for those of you who were listening last week, here's the results of last week's predictions. Rebekah, 9-6, 60%.
I don't like that I'm the first one you mentioned.
You remember the trend on how I did this from last year, huh?
I sure do.
Well, if you just went by the Harbin computer points, you would have gone 10-5, 1 game better. So
Okay.
if you'd have followed the old Fantastic 50 computer, you'd have gone 11-3. Now, of course, the old Drew Pasteur, he doesn't follow 8-man football. So we had 1 extra game to pick, and that put me over the top, 12-3, 1 game better than the computer there, or half a game better, I guess. A good solid 80% for me. So I felt pretty good. The first scores came in. I had a bad start. I had a late run. It was good.
It's less fun when everyone says the same thing, though.
That is true. So I would like to propose a slight change this week, Rebekah. 2 of them, as a matter of fact.
2 changes. Okay.
One is last week at the end of the podcast, I mentioned any of our listeners could send their picks in. Considering to do it, they would have had to then rewind back to get all the games.
Oh, we should advertise that at the beginning.
We should advertise that at the beginning.
Yeah, that's
nobody
a good
sent
point.
in picks last week. So we'll do that now. If any of you want to get in on our unofficial prediction contest here, we're going to do 6 games this week. Send in your picks form and we will report them next week. One other thing I would like to add on to here. I thought, it gets kind of boring when you say Marion Local is a 49-point favorite over somebody, and we all pick Marion Local. So I came up with a point system. Each game is technically worth 50 points, plus or minus what the point spread is according to Drew Pasteur's computer. So
Plus or minus?
yes, so if, for instance, Wapakoneta was a 14-point favorite over Bellbrook last week. So if you would pick Wapakoneta, you wouldn't get the 50 points. You get 50 minus that 14, only 36 points picking the favorite.
Okay.
But if you had correctly picked that the underdog Bellbrook would upset Wapakoneta, you get the 50 points plus those 14. You would get 64. So it would be encouraging people to pick the upset.
Okay.
Just my thought.
I'm open to it.
All
What do
right.
we win at the
So
end? Just bragging rights?
at the moment, just bragging rights. Yes.
Okay.
What should we do? I mean, I'm not going to do something silly like running around without a shirt on in December.
No, I'm not a fan of activity bets. I was thinking like a beer at Bud's or something.
The winner buys the first Christmas ale
The first
at our
Christmas ale.
at our gathering in December sometime, huh?
I think that's acceptable.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So we are going to start with Division 3, Region 12. We have no games to pick here, but just want to mention last week, Wapakoneta was playing Bellbrook. They were a 14-point favorite, but they lost at a close game, 24-11.
Oof.
Part of the reason, I believe, was Wapakoneta's starting quarterback was out for the game with a broken finger. That never helps the cause when your very good starting quarterback is unable to play. I was not able to see this game, however, but I bet you that would have been interesting at 24-21. Now, our other game in this region, we had St. Mary's was an 11-point underdog up against undefeated London.
Mm-hmm.
We were rooting for St. Mary's, but we had our doubts, and those doubts came true as London won 30-7.
Yeah.
By the way, London was our top pick back in our preseason computer points projections podcast. We said London, lead team in this region. So looks like we knew what we were talking about in this one case.
And then we forgot it.
And then we forgot all about it. Yes.
All right. Well, starting off the podcast strong with that's 2 games we picked completely wrong, both of us. So it can only go up from here.
It could only get better, right? Moving down, Division 4, Region 14. Our team Napoleon was alive as the 13th seed, and they were up against the top seeded 11-1 Sandusky Perkins. Napoleon was a 30-point underdog, and we didn't give them much hope of winning this one. Sandusky Perkins was another team we mentioned as being far and away our number one team in the region in our preseason podcast, by the way. Looking back at my notes, it said that Perkins was benefiting from open enrollment due to some chaos in the Sandusky athletic department. That was the rumor pre-seasons. Well, Perkins had a very nice season here, and they defeated Napoleon only 35-21. Napoleon put up a good fight, but Perkins was just a little bit too much. Now, as we get into our smaller divisions, we have teams still alive.
Oh, good. I was worried you were going to say they all got knocked out.
Everyone's gone. No, not quite. Everyone's gone. We're shutting down a couple of weeks early this year. We'll start Region 18 of Division 5. We have the number 2 seed, undefeated Liberty Center, is playing the number 1 seed, undefeated Milan Edison.
Ooh.
So this one sounds like a good one. Last week, Liberty Center was a 12-point favorite against Oak Harbor. Oak Harbor put up a tough fight. Liberty Center won by a field goal, 24-21. Milan Edison had a little easier game last week. They defeated Pemberville Eastwood 49-28, so a 3-touchdown win for Milan Edison. Drew Pasteur's computer says Liberty Center a 9-point favorite in this. Now, these are the computer's top 2 teams in the region, so it makes sense they made it to the regional finals. Drew's computer has Milan Edison ranked as pretty much exactly the same as it had Oak Harbor ranked. So I'm thinking another close game here. No common opponents for these opponents, and The only time either team had a close game was when they were playing someone else who was considered a very tough team.
Hmm.
So that's what you get when you have undefeated teams here. It's pick time, Rebekah.
A toss-up game. Got to go with the gut and the fandom. So I'm picking Liberty Center. I like having teams to follow.
I do too. Looking at Milan Edison's schedule, it looks pretty impressive, but I'm still going with Liberty Center. I think they're still a little bump in the road last week, but they want to make up for losing that state championship game last year. Their work is not yet done. I bet you they're working hard this week. So I'm taking Liberty Center. John, do you have any opinions or do you want to get in on this picking?
Yeah. Liberty Center year in, year out's a tough out up there in that region. I can think back of a few years ago, they beat Coldwater when Coldwater had a pretty decent team. I know that they have a pretty good program, so I'm going with Liberty Center.
All right.
Sweep. Although
Sweet.
the Harbin computer points is going to go with Milan Edison. So
Somebody has
week,
to.
here's our chance to make up some ground on the computer points.
I just like having a little bit of hope.
Now that our first pick is out of the way, it's time to veer off into our scores of the week.
Scores of the week.
All right in.
And I cheated this week, Rebekah. I put 3 in the scores of the week instead of just 2.
We're going to get back up to 7 again. Probably week 2 next year, I think I'll pick. It'll just sneak one in every week until we get there.
We're only going to do one involving our coverage area teams here, and that is West Liberty Salem beat Waynesville 45-42. One of my incorrect picks, by the way. I believe you got that one on the nose, Rebekah. West Liberty Salem was actually up 42-21 at the half. They put up 42 points in the first half. And then they only scored 3 points in the second half, but that's all they needed was those 3 points to hold on for the 3-point win.
For the sake of accuracy, we all said Waynesville.
Oh, I thought you had it right. Okay.
But that means outside of that game, you had every other pick right from here on out.
Ooh, yes. All right. Our other 2 scores of the week are going to come from outside our coverage area. Our first one, Jeromesville Hillsdale 50, Malvern 48. Not exactly air teams and towns that we hear about all the time.
They don't exactly roll off the tip of the tongue.
This
is
game
Malvern
was very
in Ohio?
Yes, it is.
Huh.
What was fun okay. Where is it at in Ohio, Rebekah?
Near Canton. It's part of the Canton-Massillon metropolitan area.
Sometime when I went up for a state football championship in the old days, I probably went right through or right by it.
Might have.
Back to this game, what was interesting, Hillsdale caught a 36-yard tipped Hail Mary pass for the winning score as time expired.
Tipped. All right.
And if that wasn't enough, the only reason they were in position to do so was that right before halftime, Hillsdale completed a 37-yard Hail Mary pass. You get a touchdown going into intermission.
All right.
You don't see 2 of them in a game very often.
Can you just run Hail Marys like the entire game? I think
might be a good offense for them.
It might not be half bad.
By the way, the one to end the game looked just like if you saw, I forget who it was. There was an NFL game a couple weeks ago. I think it was against the Bears, where one of the Bears defensive backs was celebrating and taunting the crowd as they were going to snap the ball, and he runs back over and they all tip the ball up in the air and no one's covering the receiver who's standing behind and it lands in his arms for the winning touchdown. It looked just like that. Same thing, except for the taunting of the crowd.
Yeah.
Our other game of the week, our other score of the week, Ontario 49, Shelby 48. Our Whippets go down, Rebekah.
No, not the Whippets.
Ontario outscored the Whippets 23-0 in the fourth quarter for the comeback win. It looked like Shelby had it in the bag, and Ontario put it to them in the fourth quarter for the 1-point victory.
Put it to them.
Okay, let's move over to the other region of Division 5, Region 20. And we have the 2 seed, 12-1 West Liberty Salem up against the 5 seed, 11-2 Indian Lake. This is a really intriguing game. Last week, West Liberty Salem was a 13-point underdog against Waynesville, but they won 45-42, as we mentioned in that first score of the week. Indian Lake last week was an 8-point underdog, the third consecutive playoff game they have been the underdog, and they beat Jamestown Greenview, the number 1 seed, 28-13. So the Lakers are really on a roll. But now we're going to throw a wrench into the works here, Rebekah. The computer says Indian Lake is actually a 2-point favorite. Will they know how to play as a favorite in this game?
2 points doesn't feel like enough of a favorite to be a favorite.
Yeah, it's not a whole lot. I
feel like the 5 ranking versus the 2 is going to give them enough of the underdog juice.
But you could tell the computer's been impressed with their work in those 3 upsets in the playoffs. So, by the way, 3 common opponents between these 2 teams. Indian Lake did much better against Ben Logan. West Liberty Salem did better against Graham and against Greenview. So I'm getting tired of these common opponents not telling us much, Rebekah. It's really annoying.
What, you want history to be your guide? I don't know.
I very much want history to be a guide. Yes, sir. at least until a certain game in Region 28 later in the podcast.
Okay.
But anyway, just for fun, the average scores against those 3 common opponents: Indian Lake won 29-7, West Liberty Salem won 38-16. So maybe West Liberty Salem has a slightly better offense. Maybe Indian Lake has a slightly better defense. That's the best I can tell from it. Oh, and I forgot to plan ahead as to who I'm going to pick to win this game. I have to do it on the fly. And
oh, no.
I'm going to channel a little Van right here and say I'm going with Indian Lake recovering from that tornado or whatever early in the year. Town behind them, rallying point for the community, Indian Lake all the way, I'm going to say.
I am also picking Indian Lake for the pure underdogged determination.
You happen to have any knowledge about this game, Don?
Actually, I do. I work with a guy from Indian Lake and had a conversation 2 weeks ago. Before the game started, I told them that they would beat their opponent by 14 points. You might look that up. They beat them by 14 points. This past week, I said, you'll beat this opponent. I can't remember who it was Greenview. I said,
yeah.
you will beat them by 14 points. I was wrong. They beat them by 15.
15, yep.
So he was in my office on Monday morning, and he thought I was some football savant. I'm not. And I told him that this next game is a toss-up, but I like their defense because I saw what they did for sales. So I'm going with Indian Lake on this one as well.
Okay, another group pick, and for a tough game, but we all see something we like in Indian Lake. And that leads us to this week's Team of the Week.
Team of the Week. Ba, ba, ba. Our team never seems so good. So good. So good. So good.
Is it Indian Lake?
It could have been Indian Lake, couldn't have been. But no, I made a different selection this week. This week, this episode's Team of the Week is going to be the 15-seeded Delphus St. John's Blue Jays, still alive and well in the playoffs. They defeated Leipzig 21-13 to reach the regional finals. After trailing 13-0 early, St. John's scored 28 seconds remaining in the half to close the gap to 13-6. Tied the score at 13-all with 2:24 to go in the third quarter. Then things got interesting.
Then.
Late in the game, Delphus caused the safety to go ahead 15-13. Delphus gets the ball back after the safety, drives all the way down to the Leipzig 2-yard line, where Leipzig defense holds tough and stops him. But 2 plays later, Delphus St. John tackles a Leipzig player in the end zone. It looked like another safety, but he tried to lateral the ball away. It fumbled around in the end zone. St. John's recovered it for a touchdown. It turned out they were trying to run a hook and lateral play, but the guy that was receiving the lateral had like the number 70 or something like that. Not the type of guy you normally want to be lateraling the ball to in a game, I wouldn't think.
It is high school football.
It is.
That's a good point.
It did not look like the svelte running type either.
Spelled.
By the way, Delphison missed the extra point to only be up 21-13. On the ensuing kickoff, though, Delphus forced a fumble and recovered it to wrap up the victory. So we had a safety, a fumble in the end zone for a touchdown, a fumble on a kickoff return, and a missed extra point, all wrapped up there in about 2 minutes or so, 4 minutes. But all that together makes Delphus our team of the week.
I'd say they earned it, yeah.
Okay, we're going to move down to Division 6 now. We have 2 games there also. First, the Region 22 championship game. We have the 2 seed, 12-1 Bluffton, up against the 4 seed, 11-2 Patrick Henry. Ooh, I've been kind of anticipating this one for a long time now.
This one's going to be a tough one too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Last week, Bluffton was an 11-point favorite over Toledo Ottawa Hills. They won 61-22. That's a 39-point victory. Not to be outdone, Patrick Henry was an 11-point favorite over Hopewell Loudon. Patrick Henry won 35-7. And you thought I was going to pick Hopewell Loudon.
Shame on me, I guess.
And by the way, just to back up what Rebekah says, the computer says Bluffton is a 1-point favorite over Patrick Henry. So no help from the computer. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I went back to our preview show notes this week. And there we said Bluffton was the odds-on favorite in this region. But watch out for Patrick Henry. The only common opponents for these teams are Defiance Ayersville and Columbus Grove. Both teams basically destroyed Ayersville. Patrick Henry lost to Grove 27-13. Bluffton lost 42-0 in what was far and away Bluffton's worst game of the season.
Hey.
You want me to go first again, Rebekah?
No, I think I've got my gut feeling. I think I'm going to go Patrick Henry just for that performance against Columbus Grove. It's they're not an easy team to stand up against, so they seem to have held their own. Whereas I'm not sure, was that Bluffton game early or
Week 10?
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say that was the last.
10.
Yep.
Okay, so
you
maybe
always say
not.
watch out for those Week 10 games too. Teams are getting ready for the playoffs. So.
I'm going to stick with Patrick Henry, but that performance against Columbus Grove is telling to me.
By the way, I had a phone call with our friend, the Reverend Hunsinger, on Sunday.
Sure.
Wanted to make sure we were rooting for Patrick Henry this week.
Is he going to sway your vote?
As he was the team chaplain for many years for Patrick Henry. Will he sway my vote? Yes, he will. I'm taking Patrick Henry. But mostly because I'm a fan of teams who are all their conference games are against higher division teams. And I just think they're so much more battle tested come tournament time. It's almost like they're playing easier teams in the playoffs than they had in the regular season. Patrick Henry's there's no one in a lower division than them in their conference. I think there's only one team in the same division. Everyone else is bigger. So I'm going with the Patriots from Patrick Henry.
Cool.
Now Don will tell us something that will change my mind and make me wish I'd picked otherwise.
No, I look at this and it's a toss up. I'm going to go with Patrick Henry as well, and more than anything, based on what you said about their competition in their conference and their performance against Grove.
Hard to argue with either.
Certainly is.
But by the way, the word came out today. The winner of Division 22 of Region 22 will play the winner of Region 24 in the state semifinals.
Oh, boy.
The winner of that game will play the winner of number 1, 11-1 Coldwater versus number 3, 9-3 Anna. So we have a MAC team going to be in the state semifinals here, playing against either Patrick Henry or Bluffton. Last week, Coldwater was a 43-point favorite over St. Bernard Elmwood Place. They beat the spread. They won 56-0. Anna says, if you can do it, we can do it. Anna was a 31-point favorite over Cincinnati Country Day, and they won 56-14, which was a good thing for Anna, but I kind of like that Country Day is the Nighthawks. That was kind of cool. But not good enough to help them survive against Anna. The computer, by the way, says Coldwater is a 16-point favorite over Anna.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to see how deep these computers think. All this data goes in, all this analysis, and then you look and you see in week 4, Coldwater beat Anna by 16 points, 34-18.
Gee, I wonder where that came from.
I might have been able to come up with that 16-point spread. Yeah. Okay, it's getting tougher here now. 2 MAC teams, and there's tons of common opponents here, but when they play each other, I think that's the only one that really. Some people say it's hard to beat a team twice in one year. I tend to say there's a reason you beat them the first time. I'm going with Coldwater.
I think I'm going to let Don give some thoughts before I decide.
Smart move.
So I've seen both these teams play this year. I like Coldwater a bunch. I really think that they have the ability to go to the state final. Now, they're going to potentially go to the state final, but they're going to face Kirtland potentially. So I like Coldwater in this game. I think they move on to the state semifinal. And I'm going to pick ahead, and I'm going to say they beat Patrick Henry the following week and go to the state final.
All right.
Then mighty Kirtland awaits. Most probably.
Yes. Most probably. Yeah, I can't argue against any of that. I'm picking Coldwater as well, and I am so certain in it that I have in my notes, I'll pick Coldwater before any of us opened our mouths. I think Anna's a good team. I think Coldwater's a bit of a powerhouse at the moment.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping this game is broadcast and I can watch the replay afterwards, because I kind of feel like I'm missing out. I saw Anna once this year, and they did not look good to me, and everyone else talks about how good Anna looks. It just had to have been their worst game of the year or something.
Yeah.
I was not impressed, but everyone else is, and the results look impressive. So, but I'm taking
We'll
Coldwater.
have to see.
I've also seen them both, and Coldwater was an impressive team, that's for sure. Okay, we are moving to Division 7, and by the way, this has also come out for probably like the 20th consecutive year or so. The state has decided that the winner of Region 26 will play the winner of Region 28 in the state semifinals.
Do you think they're trying to knock out the MAC teams early?
That's one theory. I would say the more likely theory is that MAC teams are from the north half of the region, and they tend to play a team from the south half of Region 26, and so they can put the game at like Wapakoneta or Lima and make a lot of money in ticket sales. That
also makes sense.
We'll talk to the financial conference commissioner guy. Does that make any sense to you, Don?
I think that's the plan I would have. Tough to argue logic.
They don't think the Minster people will drive out to the Pennsylvania border for a game.
But there's always hope every year. Maybe we could play someone from, I don't know, Portsmouth, Notre Dame or something in the state semifinal.
Ironton.
Ironton's a division or two higher, if I remember right. But someone like Ironton.
We've had big years.
Yeah,
it could happen. All right, Division 7.
Well, I'll make my one early prediction here. The Division 7 state title game is a 10:30 a.m. game on Friday, I believe.
Oof.
I predict that whoever comes out from these 4 teams we are going to mention here will win very big in that state title game, and there will be not a whole lot of ticket sales for that one.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will leave early to go to lunch before the second.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable.
Just my early Division 7 prediction. So. We will start with Region 26. We have the top-seeded 13-0 Columbus Grove up against the 15th-seeded 6-7 Delphos St. John's. Boy, this sounds like it ought to be an easy game for Columbus Grove, doesn't it?
It does. It sure does seem that way off the bat.
Let's see. Last week, Columbus Grove was a 32-point favorite over Sycamore Mohawk. They won 35-13. Even as the 15 seed, last week, Delta St. John's was a 5-point favorite over Leipzig. They won 21-13 to knock Leipzig out of the postseason. The computer says Columbus Grove should win this game by 34 points. Now, if Rebekah's right, and there's some guy sitting in a bar in Coldwater taking bets on high school games, I'm putting big money on Delta St. John's to cover this spread because the computer doesn't know that Delpha's had a whole bunch of very good players out injured earlier in the year, and many of them are back now.
Cover the spread seems likely. Are you thinking win, though?
Well,
just picking the safe bet.
Back in our preseason episode, we projected Columbus Grove to finish number 1 in this region, and we projected Delta St. John's to finish number 16. They only have one common opponent, Lima Central Catholic. St. John's lost 14-13 in week 2. Columbus Grove won 28-20 in week 9 and 38-6 2 weeks ago. Actually, like I said, I watched that Delta St. John's Leipzig game on WOSN this week. I'm not exactly a whiz with offensive play calling and knowing what they're doing, but it just looked to me like Delphus just gave up and said, "Here, give it to the quarterback and you run left or right." That looked like the play call, and that's what worked. I'm not buying that against Columbus Grove. I'm going with Columbus Grove.
Yeah, I'm a Columbus Grove fan all the way. I do enjoy seeing the state championship celebrations with the toilet paper all over the town square.
It's always fun, isn't it?
It's pretty fun. I don't think Delphus is going to do it.
I will be driving through Columbus Grove on Saturday, but I don't think they'll get the toilet paper out for a regional fight. I think they need a state championship for that.
Got to keep it special.
Yes. Anything we're missing out on here, Don?
No, I actually think that, just looking at the matchup, I thought Columbus Grove by a bunch. Looking at the scores between LCC and St. John's and LCC and Grove, they are closer than I expected them to be, with the exception of 2 weeks ago.
Right.
With all that being said, give me Columbus Grove.
Mm-hmm.
Columbus Grove has a running back that is really, really good.
Barraza and stuff.
Barraza is his last name.
Yeah,
he's an athlete.
I don't think they have or they at least display the most exciting passing game, I don't believe. But I don't think they've ever had to. So who knows? That Bluffton game was supposed to be their toughest game of the season, and that was, what did we say, 35-0. So Lima Central Catholic actually gave them their toughest test. And they made up for that the week after. They said, okay, we had one tough game against these guys. This time we're going to show them who's boss. And they did. And that takes us to our final game, the one of most interest to the 3 people doing the podcast here. Probably not to most of you, to many of you listening. In Region 28, we have the top seed, undefeated, Marion Local, late in their 4th consecutive season without losing a game, up against the 2 seed, 11-2 Minster. Last week, Marion Local was a 44-point favorite, which I thought was a little high. And they won 61-0 to knock Ansonia out of the playoffs. And most of that was in the first half. That was, I thought Ansonia was going to slow them down a lot more than that. Nope. Last week, Minster, 39-point favorite over Cincinnati College Prep. That's about what happened, as Minster won 42-0. The computer says Marion Local's a 26-point favorite over Minster. And that's in the ballpark of the 21-0 score that Marion Local defeated Minster by back in week 9. Now, there is a wild card for this game. Last week, Marion Local quarterback Justin Knauth missed the second half of the Ansonia game with some sort of injury. Was actually in street clothes in the second half, I was told. I had not heard anything as to his status for this week. Sounds like he's out.
Injury to his lower leg. The story is a fracture, but
Who knows, right?
I'm not privy to that information, so I won't.
Okay.
I won't
But
either confirm nor deny.
Some kind of lower leg injury. He's not expected to play, right?
Correct. Yep.
Some people say, "Oh, Marion Locals without their quarterback." Some other people would say, "Oh, look at their schedule all year. Their defense never lets anyone score. I don't think they need a quarterback to shut people out." So take it how you will, how that affects this game. Just doing a little look. Other than that, like I said, Marion Local won by 3 touchdowns in week 9. There is only one other team that the computers rank highly enough to prevent this from being the de facto Division 7 state championship game, and that is Columbus Grove, who through Pasteur's computer ranks as about the equivalent of Minster. So this may be your state championship game here, or it may be the next week, the winner of this game up against Columbus Grove. I have no problem saying it's not the one that happens in December in Canton. So here's where I am going to use my status as the official stats man of the Minster football team to say I really should not pick this game, and I'm going to wimp out.
Abstaining. All right.
How about you, Rebekah? You care to put a pick in?
Oh, I always care to put a pick in. In my head and in reality, I think Marion Locals got it. In my heart and in my Minster blood, I really want to see that upset. So I'm going to pick Minster for the fun and the hope of it.
All right. How about you, Don? Any thoughts?
I think it's going to be a great game. I think it could probably go either way. I could be completely wrong, but I will take Marion Local to win number 62 in a row.
62. That's a big number.
That's a big number. All numbers end someday. That's not true. All records end someday.
Correct.
Yes, they do. Officially, as the sports writer for the game, I can't have an opinion on that either. But during the game, when I'm doing stats for Minster, you better believe it. You know who I'm rooting. So then I have to turn that off when it comes time to write the article afterwards. It's not always easy to do. And I've been accused of not succeeding many times. We'll give it a shot.
All right.
That's our last game we need to pick before we wrap things up here, Rebekah. The 8-man state championship game was this weekend.
Oh, okay.
Held up at Fremont, Ohio. Undefeated Toledo Christian was taking on 9-1 Sandusky St. Mary, top 2 seeds in 8-man football. Toledo Christian had won the regular season meeting, obviously, between these two. They won that game 28-0. They repeated the win by defeating Sandusky St. Mary 24-0 to win their second consecutive state championship, or as our previous guest, Colin Foster, would say, Toledo Christian on their way to becoming the Marion Local of 8-man football.
I was about to say they're coming for that crown. 62. Yeah, so here we go.
They're only up to about 20. They've got a little ways to go. They don't get to play as many games in 8-man football. Anyway, congratulations to Toledo Christian. And if we're lucky, maybe we always like to find a state championship type coach to help us review all the state championship games in our last episode. Maybe we can get the Toledo Christian coach. That'll be one of the places we will send an inquiry out to. No guarantees, by the way, because I don't know the Toledo Christian coach.
Not yet.
Which means he probably doesn't know me.
You're a minor celebrity in very small circles.
We can get that commissioner guy from Napoleon.
Yeah.
To put in a word for us, huh?
Absolutely.
Always good to know the conference commissioners, right, Don?
Sometimes.
Especially if you offer to pay for one of his lunches.
Exactly.
At very least, the conference commissioner has everyone's email on their address book somewhere, right?
A lot of them. It's a funny story. I just got rid of some of those because I thought, what do I need these for? But
never knew Dad'd be coming by hunting for email addresses.
But there are times where you need to get in a game that's sold out. Always good to have the connections, right?
Yes, I've had a couple of stories about those situations through the years.
Good connections on a lifetime pass will get you a lot of places.
when the police catch you sneaking in, it doesn't hurt to have a athletic director for one of the teams notice you and wave him down quick to wave off the police.
Oh boy.
Actually, he
All
didn't know
right.
me. It was the two ministers I was with at the time. So the minister
Sounds like
and
you're a
the
bad
priest.
influence on religious people.
Yeah, I'm going to hell.
That could
There's
be
no doubt
said.
about it.
Oh, well. On
Yeah.
that note,
Or at least a extended stint in purgatory.
you switched
No.
religions, Dad. Lutheranism doesn't have purgatory.
Yes, but I was raised Catholic, so I have both.
True.
I believe that
As-
wraps up our preview here this week, don't you think, Rebecca?
I think so. And as a summary for your notes, in case you need to jot this down real quick, we picked identically across the board, except for the Marion Local Minster game.
Yeah, so I'm going to come in the middle of the rankings. One of you is going to win. One of you is going to come in third based on the Minster Marion game, and I'm going to come in second no matter what.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that wraps up our preview of those regional final games. As I mentioned, next week we will look at all 14 state semifinals. Many of them we won't look at in much depth at all. I mean, we're not exactly Division I experts here, and so we'll run by those pretty quick. We'll concentrate on the teams from our West Central Ohio coverage area. Look forward to that next week. And as we mentioned before, if you want to get in our prediction contest, how do you do that, Rebecca?
You can send those predictions, any comments, any questions to us you can send them to us on Twitter or X at Bruce Monnin, or you can send us via email by sending them to bdmonnin@nktelco.net. Additionally, if you want to have some more space to type out your thoughts or engage in light discussion, you can go to the comment section on our YouTube page and comment under this podcast video, which I'm sure will have some sort of stats on screen, right, Dad?
Yes. Not many, no real comments this week, but the number of viewers took an uptick this week. So,
Ooh, good to know. And of course, if you haven't already, we really appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform or service you use. This is accessible through the Apple iTunes Store, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, or YouTube. Just search for Bruce Monnin. You could add the computer points, but it's a little bit redundant at this point.
well, it's good. It's good. If you just search for Bruce Monnin and you might end up getting results from the World Wargaming Championships or something like that.
That's fair.
I don't know if
That's
you really
fair.
want to see that. So,
If you search on a podcast-oriented thing, that's going to be the only Bruce Monnin there.
well, yeah, then you're good. Yes. All right. Oh, before we let you go, Don, do you have anything you want to add here?
No, I really enjoyed your being on your show or your podcast, and wish you the best of luck. Always fun talking to you, and like I said, we had a little history at Minster Machine and a little bit in the MAC, so always fun. And Rebekah, it was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Wish you the best.
Well, thank you, Don. We really appreciate your help.
Right.
And with that, and for Don and for Rebekah, I'll say so long, everybody.